Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're mapping the incredible, rapidly changing evolution of Parkinson's disease treatments. We're going to trace a path all the way from the earliest pharmacological breakthroughs to a literal technological revolution that was just approved by the FDA. Okay, let's dive into this because the science here is absolutely fascinating and, honestly, it affects a massive portion of our global population. Just to anchor the sheer scale of this issue, right now, there are over 10 million people worldwide living with Parkinson's disease. It's actually the second most common neurodegenerative disease globally, and the impact it has on the daily lives of patients and their families is just profound. But, the story of how we've tried to treat those 10 million people brings up a really startling paradox. I want you to keep this one provocative question in mind as we go. What if curing a disease creates a brand new one? Today's explainer explores a fascinating and sometimes tragic chain reaction in medical science. We're going to see exactly how fixing one fundamental biological problem in the brain unexpectedly caused another, and how doctors and engineers basically had to completely rethink their approach to break the cycle. Let's start with Section 1, the Parkinson's dopamine deficit. We need to understand the baseline problem before we can look at the high-tech solutions. So, by definition, Parkinson's is a progressive neurodegenerative disorder defined by the loss of dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra. That's a tiny, critical structure deep in the midbrain. Essentially, the specialized cells that produce dopamine, which is this crucial neurotransmitter that helps coordinate and regulate our movement, are progressively dying off. And when that dopamine pipeline dries up, the brain's entire motor control network is just thrown totally out of balance. That internal imbalance leads to a really debilitating physical reality. The key motor symptoms include resting tremors, bradykinesia, which is just the medical term for extreme slowness of movement, severe muscle rigidity, and postural instability. Clinicians measure this progression using the Hone and Yar scale. It maps the disease from stage 1, where symptoms might just pop up on one side of the body, all the way to stage 5, where a patient is sadly bedridden and requires constant care. But here is perhaps the most insidious, heartbreaking part of this disease. By the time a patient ever feels a tremor or notices their movements slowing down, 50 to 70% of their dopaminergic neurons have already been lost. Our brains are incredibly good at compensating for damage early on, meaning this disease progresses silently and asymptomatically for years before those classic motor symptoms finally break through. Which brings us to our first major medical solution in Section 2, the levodopa dilemma. So, once the symptoms appear, how do you fix a dopamine shortage? Well, for decades, the first-line defense has been a pill called levodopa. Since the 1960s, it's been the gold standard. Levodopa is a dopamine precursor. See, you can't just swallow a dopamine pill and expect it to reach your brain. Instead, patients take levodopa, which smoothly crosses the blood-brain barrier and is then converted directly into dopamine by the brain's neurons. It basically replaces the missing neurotransmitter and restores motor function. It sounds like a miracle, right? Well, it is until it isn't. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why the pill form eventually fails. A healthy brain provides continuous, stable stimulation. It regulates dopamine perfectly minute by minute. But taking levodopa pills, say 3 to 8 times a day, that creates what researchers call pulsatile stimulation. It floods the brain with dopamine, creating a massive peak. And then it quickly drops off into a trough as the medication wears off. It's this dangerous, artificial roller coaster of dopamine that the brain was simply never designed to handle. And that brings us right back to the question we posed at the very beginning. The tragic irony here is that riding this daily dopamine roller coaster eventually causes a brand new, debilitating condition known as levodopa-induced dyskinesia, or LID. These are abnormal, involuntary, erratic movements, think severe flailing or twisting, that patients cannot control. The medication meant to restore smooth movement ends up causing chaotic movement, and staggeringly, the data shows this affects up to 80% of patients within just 5 to 10 years of starting treatment. So why exactly does this happen? Well, the brain physically rewires itself in a maladaptive way to cope with the medication's peaks and valleys. On a microscopic level, the constant flooding alters cellular communication pathways, like D1 receptors and ERK1/2 signaling. It even changes gene expression with factors like delta phos-B and triggers a neuroinflammatory response from the brain's glial cells. In short, the continuous chemical shock fundamentally damages the brain's circuitry. Let's move to Section 3, deep brain stimulation, or DBS. This is where doctors realized they needed a totally new approach. Scientists knew they had to bypass this roller coaster of oral pills altogether. If the problem was the pulsatile delivery of dopamine, they needed a way to provide continuous, stable relief to those damaged motor circuits. Enter conventional deep brain stimulation. A surgeon carefully implants tiny electrodes deep into targeted areas of the brain, usually the subthalamic nucleus. Those electrodes are then wired down the neck to a small, battery-powered pulse generator implanted in the chest. That generator is programmed to deliver continuous, steady electrical stimulation to the brain to block the abnormal signals causing the Parkinson symptoms. It is an incredible piece of engineering. DBS is often described as a pacemaker for the brain. Because it delivers that continuous electrical delivery, it successfully smooths out those harsh on and off periods that come from taking oral medication. It dramatically improves tremors and stiffness without forcing the patient to ride the dopamine roller coaster. But as is the theme of our journey today, solving one problem just reveals another hurdle. The issue with conventional DBS is that it's static and entirely blind to the brain's real-time needs. Think of it like a space heater that's always on, left at one high setting all day long. It's blasting heat whether you're sleeping, exercising, or just sitting quietly. Because it delivers a constant, unchanging pulse, it risks overstimulating the brain during quiet periods, which ironically can actually trigger dyskinesia, or understimulating the brain when the patient needs help the most. This takes us to the climax of today's explainer, Section 4, the adaptive tech revolution. Let's move to and see how this builds, because things are moving so incredibly fast now. We had levodopa in the 60s, conventional static DBS approved in 1997, and then a massive leap forward. In February 2025, the FDA officially approved the very first adaptive DBS system. And just weeks later, in March 2025, the very first U.S. clinical patient received the active system. This isn't science fiction, folks. This is happening right now. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the paradigm shift it shows. If conventional DBS is that space heater left on all day, adaptive DBS, or ADBS, is a smart thermostat. Instead of being completely blind, ADBS actively listens to the brain's local field potentials. Instead of constant stimulation, it makes real-time millisecond adjustments. When it senses symptoms flaring up, it turns the stimulation up. When the brain is calm, it dials it back down, maximizing that optimal on time and minimizing side effects. But wait, how does a machine literally listen to Parkinson's? This is the true eureka moment of this technology. It turns out Parkinson's symptoms actually have a distinct electrical signature. The ADBS electrodes continuously monitor local field potentials, specifically looking for beta band oscillations right in the 13 to 30 Hz range. Research has proven that high beta activity directly correlates with rigidity and extreme slowness of movement. So the device literally listens for these specific 13 to 30 Hz brainwaves, recognizes the biomarker for a symptom flare-up, and fires off the exact electrical countermeasure instantly. And to make this closed-loop algorithm safe and effective, it had to be trained on just an unbelievable amount of real-world data. During the pivotal ADAPT-PD clinical trial that led to FDA approval, researchers collected 250,000 hours of brain signal data from patients sleeping, exercising, and just living their daily lives. Think about that for a second. That's enough data to equal more than 28 straight years of human neurodata, all used to perfect this one single algorithm. It's mind-blowing. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, the future of personalized neuromodulation. Why does this fundamentally matter for patients going forward? We've moved from pills that cause biological damage to static electrical pulses to dynamic brain-sensing algorithms. What's next is deeply personalized responsive care. Researchers are already working on integrating artificial intelligence to predict symptom fluctuations before they even happen. We're looking at telemedicine integrations where doctors can remotely monitor your brainwaves and adjust your device from hundreds of miles away. And amazingly, by expanding the monitoring to gamma and theta alpha bands, doctors hope ADBS might soon treat the non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's too, like severe anxiety and cognitive decline. It is going to be a vast improvement in overall quality of life. So the crucial point is this: we have crossed a massive threshold in medical science. We are no longer just treating the brain blindly. We are entering into a real-time dialogue with it. If our devices can now seamlessly read and respond to our brainwaves in real time to silence the tremors of Parkinson's, what else could adaptive stimulation cure? The potential for closed-loop neuromodulation is truly limitless. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the incredible science shaping our world.